Hi, everyone. Welcome to the APJ Chats. APJ Chat is a series of dialogues with leading voices in Africa. Today, we have Soud Hyder. Soud is an African entrepreneur um, based in Kenya. He's an entrepreneur in residence at Antler. Additionally, Soud is the founder of Chap-chap Go, an online store that offers household supplies and goods. Prior to founding Chap-chap Go, Soud worked on web and social media for Al Jazeera Media Network. Soud was the platform's lead for Al Jazeera Plus. AJ Plus is a unique digital news and storytelling project promoting human rights and equality. Welcome, Soud. Thank you so much for taking out time.
Thank you very much for having me.
So, Soud, let's begin with your initial journey. How did you start working with AJ Plus, and what was that journey like?
I got into Al Jazeera almost by accident, and they were setting up a new channel in Kenya, and I had been active in the Kenyan digital media space. My background is in technology, but because the lines between, digital media, part of it is technology. So that was my entry to media. So I was working as an independent consultant, and I was referred to the Al Jazeera team. There was a new media team that was leading a lot of the new initiatives. And originally, I joined Al Jazeera to help set up a TV station that was going to be launched in Kenya, or to be based in Kenya. And one thing led to another. Eventually, that project didn't take off, and I was absorbed into the network. So I was working out of Doha. And 2 years in, AJ Plus kind of came into fruition. It was a small project then. So Al Jazeera was expanding into the US, and the new media team was tasked to come up with a digital idea to address not only the issues, but at least to service the younger audience that would not necessarily go into TV. And that's how I ended up that's how I ended up at AJ Plus. It was actually through an internal transfer. So I was initially there as one of the project leads, and then stayed on to operationalize the channel.
Thank you. What were some of the key lessons that you learned and you think would be useful for our viewers while you were building the platform?
So, we started out with a blank piece of paper. Even coming up with with the name, the branding, and the logo. I can remember we were sitting in a back office at headquarters, very small office, and we used to say that it was an overpopulated office because it was one of those offices that had a lot of people. We had a small team, but it was an office that wasn't being used, and it was allocated to a team, and that team became bigger and bigger. But starting it out from a blank piece of paper and working through different challenges, both internal and external, to a project that was launched and serviced the audience, and then seeing it grow, especially to what it is today, was fascinating. And they say Rome wasn't built in a day, and that was one of those situations where we started with an idea. We had a premise. We had a lot of data because we were managing all Al Jazeera's digital channels. So we knew where the audience was, what they're watching, and whatnot. But starting out, especially at that point, most of us were just barely over 30, and kind of being given that opportunity to be able to dream about something big and build it was very fulfilling.
So how did your transition to Chap-chap Go happen? When did you decide to start your own company, and what was the thought process behind it?
So I spent 2011 to 2017 with Al Jazeera, so that's about 6 years. Out of those 6 years, half of them were with AJ Plus. And then I took a small stint at the Turkish national broadcaster. They were doing some international expansion in Istanbul. So that was my moving from the US to Turkey before going back home. So it was a little bit like a halfway house. But working in big institutions and organizations is fulfilling in the sense that there's always budget, things kind of work, but there's always this pain that things are a little bit much slower, actually way slower. Decision making was very difficult, very long and arduous. It's an arduous process at times, and sometimes there are philosophical disagreements with the way the organization does certain things. So, as someone coming from the developing world, from Kenya, where you always want to solve problems, was that itch, and there are lots of problems back home for me to solve. And having garnered international experience, the motive was, can I go back home and start something? And Antler, I joined Antler in the first cohort. And that opportunity kind of presented itself, and the rest is history. That's how I ended up in the entrepreneurship or startup world.
Great, thank you so much. And what was the motivation behind building the product? Why did you see this was the problem to be solved?
So myself and my co-founder, was also ex-Al Jazeera, kind of looked into different things in different parts of the world. There was a startup, it was a relatively small startup in Turkey then called Getir, which was doing on-demand grocery deliveries. And then we looked at what some of the companies in the subcontinent were solving the problem. So Grofers in India, which is very big now. We looked at Bazaar and Tajir in Pakistan. We looked at what was happening in Indonesia. There are a couple of similar companies. And for us, it was like, okay, food and groceries and fast-moving consumer goods, these are things that serve the communities day to day. And we thought there are lots of inefficiencies in Kenya, and we attempted to solve. The motivation was just kind of looking at problems that we knew existed and how other emerging economies and entrepreneurs in emerging countries, economies had solved the problem, and we tried to see if we could replicate it.
Great. What opportunities do you see for the product? Do you see there's a market, there's substantial demand, or are there any other ways of thinking about it for you?
I mean, there is a lot of demand. So if we go through our journey, we had to pivot, and eventually we actually shut down the company for various good reasons and bad reasons. But it is a very competitive space. There is a lot of opportunity in the continent. There are big players. Well, the startups actually are very small. So in Kenya, in the case of Kenya, all the startups in that segment combined serve less than 10% of the market. So things are still distributed using traditional wholesalers, informal retailers. That is the dominant form of distribution. The various startups that have solved this differently. So a good number of the startups looking at, instead of replicating the wheel, is to aggregate demand and use existing infrastructure, the retail infrastructure, to distribute products. How can the product be? In the case of Kenya, it's very different because the incumbents are ridiculously big. Even a company like Twiga that has raised well over $100 million cumulatively is still struggling to get market share because the main distributor still there is a reluctance to change. And possibly looking at what's happening in other markets, possibly the solution is just to make the current distribution ecosystem more efficient, either through aggregation or use of technology or tools to make them slightly more efficient, either on the demand side or on the supply side. So the various different permutations that lots of people are trying out currently. And I think the bigger problem is, if you're looking at Africa, is the markets are very fragmented. So Kenya and Tanzania, two neighboring countries, but two totally different ways of doing business. So Kenya and Uganda and whatnot. So there's still a lot of room for improvement. There's still a lot of room to And then the biggest challenge actually is we have infrastructure that's not well, how would I put it? It's not well, it doesn't work well. So unless you own the assets, working with third party, and that's the challenge of this new age commerce or e-commerce or digital commerce in Africa. Scaling it is ridiculously difficult because the rails still are not well lubricated. So either you get into a partnership with someone who has that infrastructure, or you try to build it out yourself, which is also an expensive affair. And you might be replicating the wheel at a certain point. So those are the challenges over there. But I think the future is bright. Like there's just so much investments and innovation that are happening in our part of the world that we always have to be optimistic.
Thank you. That was my segue to the next question. What challenges broadly do you see within the African context while building digital products or services?
So economic integration in some cases has been done on paper, like the East African Community or COMESA, but is it really so there's ratification is one thing, but implementation and the countries actually making sure that goods and labor and capital can move freely amongst these economically integrated regions is something else. So I think in terms of policy and in terms of governments, they just need to go. They need to accelerate it because it just in the individual markets, unless you're like Nigeria or Egypt or South Africa, and probably Tanzania and Ethiopia, those markets can sustain themselves domestically. All other countries need to trade, and economic integration is offers a tool set to make trade easier and the movement of goods and services. So that's one thing that needs to be really, really, really looked into. And the second bit is, in some cases like Kenya, and I would assume bits of Nigeria, but particularly Kenya, is the taxation regimes outpricing small businesses out of the market. So over the last 10 years, we've had a very aggressive tax regime that is trying to broaden the tax bracket by having smaller businesses and entrepreneurs, trying to get them into the bracket. But it's not commensurate to how much incomes are rising. So taxation is rising much faster than the economy is growing, and it's getting a lot of small scale businesses into unnecessary costs and hurdles when it comes to growing the businesses, as opposed to Kenya probably 15-20 years back, so from 2002 to 2012, where the government then actually had a deliberate move to lower taxes, to lower interest rates, which brings me on to my next point, is when it comes to monetary policy. So we are struggling with, so if you look at funding in Kenya, a lot of funding from startups is coming through some sort of FDI. So, but in this case, it's venture capital, which is a good thing. But your average small business struggles to raise capital internally because a lot of the banks wouldn't want to take that risk. And the reason for that is the banks conveniently now, because the interest rates, the government interest rates, the central bank rates are relatively high. We had an infrastructure bond that was oversubscribed last week, and the government was offering almost 13%, so 12.96%. So most commercial banks would rather make money risk-free investing in or buying government bonds than actually putting credit out into the market. So you're finding that small businesses are being crowded out. So when it comes to monetary policy and a little bit on the fiscal policy, a lot more has to be thought out to make this to make it easier for small businesses and to make it easier for startups to raise money domestically. And then lastly is when it comes to immigration policy. So you'd find that immigration policy within Africa is still a big problem, even if it's just to travel for business, whatever. So yes, within the regionally integrated units, at least that has been solved, temporary travel and everything else. But setting up camp in a different company, in a different country, and setting up a business there, getting work permits, right to work and whatnot, is still a very ridiculous and difficult process. And African countries do not have immigration policies to attract talent within the continent, enable talent from the region even. So you'd find that there's a lot of talent drain now, either going into the West or going to the Gulf, the Middle Eastern states, your OECD countries, so your Australias, Canadas, and bits of Europe. Those incentives for Africans to move to other African countries are still not there. So we end up, especially in the tech industry, we end up losing a lot of programmers and technical talent to other countries.
Thank you. What future areas of growth do you see? What kind of market segments are going to boom? And what are your thoughts on that within the African ecosystem, and what opportunities exist?
So I think on the infrastructure side, especially when it comes to energy, renewable energy and microgrids, the prices of the inputs have drastically fallen. So people opening up small or medium-sized or even large-scale solar farms, in some cases wind farms as well. But I think when it comes to microgrids, especially offering electricity to small communities, or offsetting the cost of production through renewable energy, that's becoming really, really big. Technology, obviously, especially on the fintech side, that's becoming really big, especially now with digital currencies in either form, whether you're on the extreme side with cryptocurrencies or with central bank issued currencies. That seems to be really, really big, or mobile money as well. So, but fintech as a whole in Africa is big because it's giving people access to financial services in a way that has never been done before, and probably has never been done to this scale in human history. So very big opportunities there. Everything from just moving money and that could be moving money domestically or moving money from diaspora back to people back home. That's still a very wide market. Offering other financial services, credit, insurance, just basic financial advice, avenues for investments. The continent generally saves a good chunk. We don't save as much as Asia, but there is, a huge population that is more successful than the previous generation. Some are actually working remotely, domiciled within the continent, but working for other jurisdictions. So there's a lot of money coming in for people who are working, and they don't have avenues to put that money to good use. So fintech solutions that allows people to invest, whether locally or internationally, but mostly locally. There's so many opportunities around that other institutions or other digitally savvy finance institutions can use to move money around to other bits of the economy. Lot of opportunity there. Agri-tech, that's an area where I think Africa as a continent has been lagging behind. There are few areas where things are somewhat working. Pockets of Egypt, pockets in Nigeria, and pockets of Tanzania. But the continent is now getting more aware, more informed, so improving our food production to more modern techniques. Really big opportunity there. Transport and logistics, it's fragmented. So when it coming to aggregation or just better visibility on prices and discovery for buyers of the transport and logistics services, big opportunity there. So I think those are the major areas of anticipated growth.
Thank you, sir. I think we've touched on all the aspects of it, from the opportunities to the policy initiatives. My final question is a bit of a personal one. What would we suggest young African entrepreneurs who are just sitting and watching this and about to begin this journey? What would your suggestions and reflections would be?
So, I mean, there hasn't been a better time to be an entrepreneur than now. This is globally, right? It's not only in Africa. So, give it a shot. It's not easy. So you have to be mentally prepared. You have to be logically prepared as well in terms of how you're structuring your finances, how you're raising funds. Capital is key to production, however way you look at it. So there are no two ways about it. Is you have to figure out where the money is going to come from, right? So either the business generates revenue or you get a significant amount of capital that's decent enough to at least get you out of the door, and you can always raise more. And networking is critical. So whether you're trying to sell a product or a service, or you're trying to raise capital, networking is key. And lastly, I think it's been so much easier to raise capital now for most parts of the continent. At least if you're in technology, in the hotspots, so Egypt, Nigeria, a little bit of Ghana, definitely Kenya, and South Africa, and you see a little bit of activity in Tunisia and Morocco, and then everyone else. I mean, the Zambians are trying to change policy to be able to attract more startups. Rwandans as well are trying. Noscan recently opened up a big accelerator in Rwanda. So this is the best time to be an entrepreneur. So, and sometimes you have to try and fail and keep on trying again, but not to give up. Talk to the right people. And there's no substitute for knowledge and experience. So try to get as much knowledge as possible, but most knowledge actually is in teams. So it's like the network effect of having very smart people around you, either as advisors or employees, or co-founders, and starting up and running businesses, especially in this day and age where you need multiple skill sets, multidisciplinary skill sets, and everything else. It's a team sport. There are very few businesses where you can survive as an individual contributor. Most of the businesses that actually can work, especially in the continent, and can scale, require multiple people in multiple disciplines. So learn how to work in teams and how to collaborate.
Thank you so much for your time, Soud. This has been a pleasure and delight. I hope our viewers will take away those lessons. And thank you for taking our time. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time as well, and I wish you guys all the best. And we'll be watching your future videos as well.